I'm still glowing. That was super fun. I just had a great conversation with Gloria Owens, otherwise known as Glow. And you're going to get a chance to see a multi-passionate entrepreneur in action. And we talk about aging, we talk about sacred geometry, we talk about how to be kind to ourselves and how to be creative and get in the flow and not do it all. I mean, really, really rich conversation. I hope you enjoy it. Gloria Owens, she's a creative alchemist. Her work bridges physical, spiritual, and visual realms. She's a longtime yoga teacher, a visionary artist, a freelance graphic designer, and she just brings decades of experience, life experience, work experience, connection with nature, embodiment practices, and intuition to everything she does. So have fun, enjoy, glow. And I truly hope that you walk away with your own inspiration, with some insights and ideas on how to stay in your flow, to be creative, and to be attuned to spirit and nature. Enjoy. Glow, you're such a multi-dimensional being with so many talents. I'm really happy that you're here because there's a lot you have to share with the world.
Thank you. Well, it's been a treat to work with you and also through the Creators Circle to merge some of those different talents, which had seemed like sort of different paths. And as a multi-passionate entrepreneur, I'm sure some of your viewers can relate when you've got either multiple businesses or multiple ways that the creativity wants to come through. And for a while, design and art were kind of very separate from yoga and more of the embodiment piece. I kind of had those two worlds very separate. But now more and more they're merging, and that's just a treat.
Well, and they are, and that's really kind of how we intersected originally. Was I saw your graphic work and what you were doing with one of my clients. And
right.
it was so awakening. It was alive. And I said, who does your artwork? Who's your graphic designer? So that was my original reach out to you. And then we've shared community in the Creator Circle, and you gave me a rebrand, which I am forever thankful for. It seems like you have just an eye for people's potential in ways that they can have it shine online.
Mm. Well, and can we talk about your rebrand just a little bit? Because you had come to me coming out of a lot of corporate work. It was very buttoned up. It was very professional. But as I was getting to know you, I was like, this is a disconnect. It didn't feel like you. And it didn't feel like how you were evolving your business. And so, yeah, the challenge was how to let that all be, including your book and other things that had value, like your soul map, your business soul map. But how could we then bring that into a whole new feeling of what joy was about? And so I do that with a lot of my clients. Often they come to me with one thing in mind. They're like, oh, I need a logo, or oh, I need a website, or thinking about X, Y, Z. But you're right. It is not just my eye, but I listen intuitively. I feel into the energy of people. So yes, it's strategic, and yes, it's graphic, and yes, we want to hit all those buttons. But really, it's about, for me, being able to capture the essence of someone or their business and put that out in a way that's going to resonate with our clients. So,
and for me, it was really getting current with how I express myself, because you were attending some of the free masterclasses and hearing me speak. And you sent me an email and said, Joy, you're more grounded, you're more earthy, you're more flowing. The spiritual energy, the elegance of who you are, I don't see it on your website. And I was like,
I wasn't feeling it.
I was like, sold. Thank you. Thank you. But it was born through how you saw me express myself in the world. And I know that's what you did with this other client of yours that really introduced me to your world. So it's a gift that you have.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, and it's interesting because all of my practice of yoga and energy work and cultivating intuition and meditation, while that had seemed really separate from my graphic design work, especially when I was doing more corporate things, working at an agency, et cetera, for a while, I now realize that that really is, that synergy really is what gives me a little different view on the world and able to help my clients in different ways.
Well, and you work with primarily in your graphic world, clients who are more soul inspired, who really are in the healing arts or expansive consciousness growing. So it just is, it's like you live in that world too. You live
Yes.
in
Well, and
that
I
world.
speak the language too. So, in the case of this other client, we are talking about a lot with chakras and sacred geometry. And so, when she was saying, I need a visual that can explain, how the energy runs through the body and put it in the torus field. And I understood what that meant. And so, um, yeah, to have the ability, for me, it's play. Like I get to bring something that wasn't, I literally say bring down because it's kind of like bring through something that didn't exist yet in the world visually and uh, turn it into something, I want to say physical, but sometimes it's, if it's online, it's visual, but it now has a life of its own for
Well,
whatever purpose that is.
yeah, it seems to me that like one of the threads in your multi-passionate entrepreneurial life is this ability to bring energy into form, because I think of yoga, it's bringing energy into the physical body into form. Your visionary art, which I want to talk about, which is different than your graphic design work, although similar, right? It's still using some of that.
Mm-hmm.
You're bringing energy into form. And so let's talk about your visionary art for a moment. Let's go there if you're open to this. Because I'm
Yeah.
curious how you are combining original photography with sacred geometry. And what is it that you're wanting to convey in that work?
Yes. So actually, this piece behind me is one of
Okay.
my newer pieces, but that's just an example. So I had studied photography back in college and have always considered myself a photographer as well as a graphic designer, but always not a professional photographer, kind of casually, but always seeing the world through a lens. And back in the day, it was film and in the dark room. Of course, now it's digital. And when I finally got back to doing my own artwork after literally decades of mostly doing design for other people, I thought, what is my tool of choice? I used to study painting and drawing and all of that tactile stuff, but I realized my tool of choice really still was the camera and the computer, that Photoshop had become my tool of choice. And so rather than just saying, okay, well, this is a lovely photo, you know, on its own, I thought, what happens if I get to start to play with these? Not unlike doing double exposure in the dark room or triple exposure in the dark room when we used to do it that way, except now the tools are a lot more sophisticated. So now I get to layer photographs and layer pieces and layer sacred geometry. Um, a lot of the pieces surprise me. Sometimes I don't even have a specific concept that I'm working with when I start. It's usually one or two photos that kind of call to me. And then how it wants to evolve. So part of my practice is getting out of my own way. And we can talk more about that too, but like, how do we get into creative flow where we're not overthinking so much and we can get out of our own way and let something miraculous come through? And then I'm kind of surprised and delighted at the end too. I'm like, oh, cool, look what happened.
Well, that is exactly what came to me is what you're talking about and how you do the visionary art. That is the creative process. It applies to anything.
That's
It's
right.
how a musician can really write the best composures. It's or how a musician can write the best compositions. Or I know for myself in speaking, when I'm leading and facilitating, which is one of my art forms, I am so surprised by what comes through or activities and exercises that I can orchestrate and facilitate with a group. And it is when I get out of my way. It is when I get out of my head. And so we're talking
Yes,
about art, creating art, but this is also like key for manifestation. It's how we create the lives we love. If we can just get,
absolutely.
yeah, yeah. What are some of your thoughts on getting into the flow state?
Well, so that's where yoga, dance, breath work, it's interesting because that's where the embodiment comes
Yeah,
for me. I don't
yeah,
think you can get there by thinking about it. Um, for some people, it might be getting out into nature, taking a walk, uh, meditation, whatever it is. For me, movement and music are really, really key. And I know you're someone who loves music as well. We have shared some playlists and things of that sort, things that really move us. And while the yoga I teach now is gentle more than gymnastic, there's still an aspect of kind of cultivating our instinct and our breath and our curiosity so that we can explore and get out of our own heads. And so these two worlds of mine that I thought were really separate actually are intrinsically linked. I sometimes say that the yoga or dance or movement, mindful movement, is using the body, using this meat suit to access spirit. We're getting the kinks out, and then we're cultivating energy or cultivating this to hopefully be more open to spirit. And then the art and design is bringing spirit through back down into earth. It really is this yin yang for me, this cycle that I need both those aspects in my world.
yeah.
And when
We
I think about dropping one or the other, at one point my husband was like, do you just want to teach yoga or do you just want to do design? I was very busy. I was in my 40s. I was running a design studio and raising kids or running a yoga studio rather, raising kids, working at a design studio. It was a lot. And he was like, does something have to go? And it was like, no, I actually need both. I just need to be able to better manage my energy and time and give myself rest and give myself space also to be in the flow. Because if it's too busy, oh my goodness, to-do list is just too long and we're chunking away. That doesn't necessarily create a good flow state. We might be getting stuff done and checking off the list, but it's not necessarily creative time. And in fact, I sometimes have to carve out whether it's an afternoon or a day or a week. I call it glows flow time. And sometimes I need to putz around first and water my plants and like do something else first, take a walk before I can even be in that headspace.
Yeah, yeah. And I want to just go back to what you were saying about getting in the body, because
Yes,
to be in that creative energy, to be an instrument of divine in the world, in our work, whatever that work might be, we can utilize the brain. It's very, very helpful. So glad I have it. Thank you, brain. Thank you so much.
thank you, Brain.
But you're speaking to embodiment. You're speaking to this taking care of the temple and getting out of the head and getting into the heart, getting into the breath, getting into the physical, letting the kinks out. So I just want to emphasize that because I'm just 100% with you in agreement and want to add, I love to go barefoot on the grass. I am one of those connect with nature. So I get into the body of nature and the oneness, the synergy of me in nature. And that can just take me into my senses and my sight and my
Absolutely.
listening and my smell. And in that place, there's room, there's space for something greater than me. I called it the bright genius in my book, but to really come through. And that's where the
Yes,
masterpieces they happen. But it is also where then we become more efficient in my experience, right? Like the to-do list, just check, check, check. I didn't know it could be so smooth, right?
well, you spoke to something there that I want to call out, which is creating space. Whether it's creating sacred space, physical sacred space in our office, a place to be, to connect, to journal, to dance, whatever it is. And some of us like, oh, I don't have room in my house. I downsized a couple of years ago where, I used to have an art studio and now I don't. I have my office and a little place where I can spread out to create some of my work or frame something. But it's like we've got to find ways to carve out those little spaces, even if it's a corner of a bedroom or a place in the garden or whatever it is, to make space outside. But the space you're talking about is this space inside that I know when I feel tight, when I feel stressed, when I feel anxious, there's a sense of a lack of space or a sense of contraction inside. And the more that I'm aware of my body and aware of that, the more then I can have tools to shift that. And even sometimes just taking a deep breath or taking a stretch can make some more space. Oh, and certainly the kind of conscious and slow and delicious kind of yoga that I like to teach is all about kind of trusting our bodies and making more space. And so then we can receive whatever it is we want to receive.
How did you get into yoga? I've never asked you.
So I was working in New York City in a graphic design company. I was 29. I had been in a car accident in a cab as a passenger. And I
Wow.
had gotten side to side whiplash. My right shoulder was a mess. I was having a lot of numbness between my neck and my shoulder and in my right hand. And I remember commuting on the train at one point and thinking, oh my gosh, I'm too young to feel this bad already. Like I was feeling really locked up in my body and pain. And I was looking at these, guys twice my age commuting on the train around me and thinking, oh my gosh, if I'm going to do this for another 25 or 30 years, this is not looking good. And so I thought somebody had recommended yoga, and I had always loved, I had figure skated when I was a teen. I had done dance and some gymnastics and this and that. So I had always loved embodiment things, but I had not tried yoga at that point. And I started taking a beginner class once a week on a Wednesday night. I remember that clearly because I'd come in like a knot on Monday and Tuesday. I'd do yoga, and Thursday and Friday, I could see how much more my work flowed, how much more ease there was. And then over the weekend, I'll come back somehow and I'd be a mess Monday and Tuesday. But that's how I got into yoga, like many people, for the physical aspect. I thought, I just need to get the kink out of my shoulder. I need to feel better in my body. What I didn't realize was it was going to be now a 35-year journey of self-inquiry, really, is what it is. Not so much about perfecting all those outer poses, but all kinds of different styles of yoga, eventually teacher training at Kripalu back in 1994. This is 30 years ago. So I've been teaching for 30 years. It has evolved so much over that time. There's been yoga dance and somatic movement and Thai yoga massage and Tai Chi and all kinds of things that I've explored in the mix. But truly the heart of my teaching is still Kripalu yoga, which has less focus on perfecting those outer poses and more focus on how those poses and putting ourselves in different positions shift our energy and create an inner journey. And so here I am 30
I
years
know
later.
here you are, and you have an amazing library of videos that you've created and an online membership where people can have access to all of that. But your focus now is real yoga for beginners and boomers. What is
beginners, boomers, and seniors, really. Certainly as I've aged, I'm now in my 60s, and I've also struggled with a hip injury. I think from all those years of ice skating and probably falling on that hip. And it's very humbling. I thought, oh, I can't do maybe what I used to do, but how can I still truly get a full practice? And more of my students are boomers and seniors, folks who maybe they did yoga back in the 60s or 70s and they're coming back around to it. Maybe they've never tried it before. Maybe their doctor is saying, hey, you need a little more mobility and flexibility. You want to try some yoga? I have a lot of PT people recommend yoga to their clients and are glad when they have come. But I also teach a lot of beginners. I find that now I love to introduce yoga in a way that is not too scary and not too intimidating, and that can empower students to feel like they can do it in their way and learn how to do it safely for their bodies and modify as needed to get the benefits of it without the pain and the strain.
What?
I'm done with the pain and the strain.
Yeah. I want to talk about that in a second, but you have an online live class too, correct? So
Oh, no, actually not anymore. But
okay.
the online library that I have came out of doing those online live classes, which really came out of COVID. It was a strange gift. I had left hundreds of students in Connecticut where I used to live and the yoga studio that I used to own and teach, and was really feeling very sad about leaving everyone before moving to a completely other area of the country here in South Carolina. And COVID happened, everything went online. And I was like, well, if everyone's teaching from their living room, then I've got to learn the tech. I've got to figure out the lighting and the sound and all that stuff, get over myself on camera. And basically for 4 years taught, continued to teach classes online and got to stay connected to all those students. But they were seniors. And so it's a gentle yoga videos. Some of them have chair yoga, some of them have mindful movement, but they're always yummy and delicious and good for those beginners, boomers, and seniors.
Oh my gosh, you said something. I have to go back. Get over yourself on camera. And so this
Oh,
is something,
hello.
I know this is something like being visible and being on video and being on camera. So, because I know a lot of people relate to this, especially because you're right. A lot of my community are entrepreneurs, service professionals. What is your advice for people who are having a difficult time getting visible and being on camera?
You know, it's interesting because I thought, oh, I'm not so skinny anymore. Gosh, do I really look like that on camera? Um, the getting over it was really to say, I've got something I need to offer. There are people out there that need what I have to teach. And so get over it, Glow, because we can be self-critical, so self-critical. And that's really the thing. I think we're way more critical of our than most other people are. And if we're providing something that someone is just drinking in, they don't care if we've got the extra 10 pounds or a few more wrinkles or whatever. They're just glad to receive that. And so part of it was, yeah, just learning the tech and getting all of that set so I was comfortable enough to do it online. But also, and you're really pro at this, I have to say. I've learned a lot from you. Learning how to connect over a screen. It's different than being in a room with students and hearing them laugh and breathe, and but how to help us feel connected even across the interwebs here. And you are very gifted at that as well. And so that was a learning process for me, but more and more as I would go back and watch my videos and hear my students' feedback, I was also like, okay, that worked. That not so much. Let's do a little more of that next time.
You're
And
saying so
experimentation.
much that's important. It's like, I know for myself that if I really do feel like I am here for the one in front of me, and whether it's one person or 500 people, right? It's like, I do get over myself. And the flip of that, the flip of the self-critical, being so into myself and what I'm doing wrong, can also be the being so into myself that I'm just enjoying the sound of my own voice, right? The self absorption. And so we're kind of, once again, we're talking about how do we be instruments to let divine through us? How do we surrender enough in camera experiences, online, in person, even alone, to get out of the way to let spirit come through. So thank you to speaking to that. I'm really glad we went there. There was something else that I think is so important, and it has to do with technology that you were willing to learn. And I don't know if you heard this story once, but I just have to tell it because it was shocking to me. I was hired by the local community college. I've done a lot of instructional design and curriculum development
Yes.
to create a course on business technology. And this is like 10 years ago. Now, at that point, technology was not my friend, not something I was very interested in. And I thought, why are you asking me to do this? But anyway, what I did is I brought together two different focus groups and I called upon instructors, technicians, graphic designers, digital, I mean, just like anyone in the tech field in the county, held these two focus groups and asked them questions like a beginner. And so anyway, a curriculum came into form. But what surprised me about all of these IT people and business people is when I asked, what's the most important like skill that we can teach people? They said the ability to be willing to learn. That technology is always changing. And it's not a skill. If there's any skill, it's just to be willing to learn. And so the emphasis that I'm bringing to my own befriendment of technology since that experience is I'm willing to learn to love technology. I'm willing to learn to learn technology. Like I'm going to forever be a student and be patient through the process. And so back to you, COVID, can't do yoga in person. You figured it out.
I figured it out. It was pretty rough at the beginning of like literally my laptop stacked on boxes on a table and a couple of lamps, like trying to light it better. I mean, I would take over the living room. It was actually pretty funny. And little by little, it was like, okay, I need a tripod with a stand for my laptop. I need better lights. But really, the most challenging part of the technology and the interesting part of being willing to learn and experiment was the audio, because I initially had a clip mic thing, but in yoga, I'm moving around and I'd go up and down and it would bump. And if I turned my head this way, you wouldn't hear the sound. And I was like, that's not working for what I'm needing to do here. I need a better solution. Then I got kind of one of those over the head mics that the, fitness people have at the gym with the big black thing in front of here. I tried at least 5 different mics, Joy. Let's just say that. And I would listen to the sound afterwards. I would listen to the recordings. I would see where the issues were. And I'd be like, well, that's incrementally better. But I really wanted it to be better, like really good, and that I wouldn't have to worry about it. And so it was a learning process, an experimentation process. And I can see in some of those earlier videos, I still have the big black boom mic near my mouth, but that's okay. That worked for a while, and then I eventually upgraded and upgraded.
It's a quest. It's like
a quest.
A quest for beauty, but not being critical along the way. So back to that, like, oh, okay, I'm going to learn from this instead of being self-critical. It sounds like you just kept saying, how can this be more pleasant for the one listening, for the one doing the yoga with me, right?
Yes. Well, and also a key for me was music. So I was used to using music in my physical classes. And if you have music in a room like this with some kind of mic, it's either not going to pick it up, or it's going to be distorted, or it's going to compete with your sound. And so I kept thinking, how can I get the music and the playlists that I want to help create this experience, have it sound great for the students, and be able to control the volume of my voice and the volume of the music separately. And so that was a whole learning process. And I won't go into it now, but I did figure it out. And so that became also a thing that differentiated my classes online. Students would say, oh, we take all these other online classes and there's no music, or it's distorted, or the sound's crap, or whatever. And yours are so lovely. How do you do it? So anyway, it was worth it to me, because that was the experience that I wanted to have them to have. And I guess this comes back always to whatever business we're in. What's the experience we want our clients to have? And sometimes the technology doesn't seem to answer that initially. And so I had to look for some out of the box solutions initially on that.
What is the experience that you hope people have with your visionary art? That was a question I wanted to ask you, and just kind
Oh,
of add in the sacred geometry, because we didn't finish that. Yeah.
yeah. Thank you for looping back to that. And it's actually really similar to the experience I want them to have in yoga, which is a sense of beauty, reverence, attunement, alignment, awe, that the sacred geometry that I use, even if you don't understand exactly what it means or where it comes from, there is energy kind of built into the DNA of that, if you will, the DNA of those shapes. And they, for me, add sort of an interesting layer over the photography that for some people, they're curious. They're like, wow, what's that about? A lot of my work has kind of an inner and an outer. I want to say almost like you could zoom in to something or zoom out. For me, it's the same thing in yoga. We're exploring inside to expand our consciousness, or maybe taking a sense of expansion and light and bringing it right down back into the center. And so for both, it's cultivating um, just awareness and beauty and openness and curiosity. Because sometimes some of my pieces are rather abstract. They're mandalas and things. Whoa, what is that? And so to get drawn in to a world for contemplation or meditation or expansion, that's really what I'm doing with the art.
And I'm guessing it is that for you. The creative process is that for you.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's so yes, the um the act of creation for me, that being in the flow, getting out of my own way, letting something unique come through. And of course I tinker with it. Sometimes I'll put it aside for a while and be like, that's not quite it yet. I'm not quite sure. And I'll come back to something later. Sometimes it needs to rest or be revisited. But the the act of creation really for me is also what the final piece in a way is about. How do we bring light, spirit, grace, inspiration, whatever it is, down into physical form? And how do we allow physical form to evolve, to grow naturally? A lot of my work has themes of growth, transformation, expansion.
When I think of sacred geometry, I often go to the Fibonacci spiral,
Yes,
uh, which is found in like the shells typically, but all over nature, right? Like our fingertips, there's the 1 and the 2, which make the 3, right? So,
that's right.
but it's inherently about growth. It's about growth. It's about expansion. For people who aren't familiar with sacred geometry, what would be like a sacred geometry for beginners? How would you just, what is it? What is sacred geometry?
Oh, goodness. So, word sacred, we're talking about something that's reverent, something that's godlike, something that's maybe even beyond our day to day. It's something special, right? And geometry is the branch of mathematics that has to do with shapes and angles and um, circles, squares, triangles, etc. Platonic solids. Um, you might have to go back to ninth or 10th grade math, whatever it was for you to remember geometry. But when you put those two together, when you say sacred geometry, we're really looking at these mathematical formulas, shapes that happen in nature and that are kind of the underlying blueprint of creation. And I say that, I know that's kind of a bold statement, the underlying blueprint of creation, but it's in everything from the seashell to looking that Fibonacci series to looking at the crest of a wave to looking at a hurricane from space. It's still the same geometry, same numbers, to actually the entire galaxy that we're in. So from the microcosm to the macrocosm, to me, there's a divine designer, right? There's a divine designer. Like, who designed this? This is really cool. And the fact that, as you mentioned, some of even our body proportions have to do with those numbers. Our DNA is built that way. And a lot of sacred geometry shapes that often start with circles and triangles rather than spiral, like Metatron's cube and the Vesica Piscis, which is the two overlapping circles with, it's the first cell and the second cell. It's literally how life begins. And then when you start to duplicate that, it's the 4 cells and the 8 cells. Like, we all started that way from a single cell in the embryo. So when we talk about growth and life growth, it's not just like how plants grow, although some of them grow in those incredible designs and proportions too. You think about sunflowers or pine cones, or have you ever really looked at an artichoke or the seeds on a strawberry? I mean, when you start to really look, there's all these incredible designs and patterns that show up in nature. And so to me, there's awe and wonder all over the place if we just actually start to look. And that's part of the reason why I love to use sacred geometry in my work, because to me, it's just ingrained really in the macrocosm and the microcosm all around us. It's how we are designed. And if you've ever gotten to read a bit about Dr. Emoto and his studies on water in the early 2000s, I believe now, but he studied our thoughts and emotions and music and how they would affect water molecules. And so he froze water so that he could take slices of it and look under a microscope. And the net is beautiful words that we tell ourselves: love, joy, grace, I love you. Make these incredibly beautiful sacred geometry crystals. They look like snowflakes. They look like gorgeous, gorgeous crystals. And other thoughts and words that are not so nice are muddy or don't even turn into geometry at all. And so when I think about, again, back to embodiment, that we are 60 something percent water. We talk about the words we say to ourselves, the things we think, the people we surround ourselves with, the stuff that we watch, that literally changes the molecules of water in our body. And that when we truly are attuned and seeing the beauty, that we literally have sacred geometry in our body. I just think that's too cool.
As you were speaking, the word that just kept coming to me was attunement. Attunement with nature. You actually said attunement just a few moments ago too. I'm sitting here going, attunement, attuning or resonating with what is natural, the designer, the divine designer that you spoke of. And so your art is offering nature, photographs of nature for the most part, and then layering it with some sacred geometry. So maybe even emphasizing those codes, if you will. And if we could live our lives, our culture, and create from that, those kinds of frequencies, those kinds of forms. Because I have studied a lot of business, right? So,
yes,
form does dictate function. And I think about the difference between a board table where there's a head of the board and then a linear line of those that are participating, as opposed to a round table, a circle. How does that dictate the conversation and the dynamic of making choices and decisions, right? So a board table with someone at the head and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that at all, but I am saying that will create a certain kind of functioning or hierarchy, as opposed to a round table or a circle. of consensus or conversation or coming together in choice, which is why I call the creators circle a circle. And my women's leadership circle is a circle because we learn so much from each other. But that form, right? That form makes a difference in how we meet, how we connect. And so thank you for that explanation. I really loved listening
I hope that's
to
helpful.
you. Oh, I think it's funny because, you know, it sparks just pondery and inquiry. You brought up that word. It sparks for me also just a, once again, deep reminder that the more I live in accord with natural principles, which is everything from going to bed early to waking up early with the sun, you know, but the more I just really find myself engaged in the natural world, and the more at peace I feel, the more my nervous system is regulated, the more creative I am. It's really natural. That's why the word is natural. I love the word natural. Let it be easy. Let it be natural. And it feels like your yoga is also inviting people to do what's natural to them, not what other people are dictating, not what some yoga teacher is telling them to do. Glow,
including me.
well, okay. So here, let me ask you a personal question.
Yeah.
Because I know you were talking about aging and you were talking about your hip injury. And so yoga is different for you too than it used to be. And your ability
Absolutely.
to do yoga in the ways you used to might be changing because of injury. And how are you personally just reckoning with that? And how do you encourage your clients that are having physical challenges or aging issues come to peace with the process? But how do you do? Yeah, because
it's such a good question, because we can easily bump up against frustration or comparison, be like, oh, I used to be able to do this, or, you know, this doesn't feel good anymore. And I certainly had those days, honestly, where, you know, I just felt frustrated or defeated or sad, even like kind of grieving the body that I used to have or grieving the abilities that I used to have. But truthfully, the practice in and of itself is what continues to bring me back again and again and again. Because it can be so simple. It can literally be breathing and doing really simple, subtle movement. And for a while, my practice got more and more subtle. Like it became more and more internal, more and more subtle. Again, less about outer poses, big stretches, whatever, and more about feeling into the edges of, well, does this part need rest? Does it need TLC? Does it need opening? Does it want warmth? Does it want cold? Like just to really befriend my body again. So there was sort of a sense of having to befriend this body now again. And I think that is something that we all could use some of it at any age and stage, because we're not all Superman and Superwoman all the time. Even if we're fit, even if we're athletic, I've spent my life, you know, doing all kinds of athletic things. And yet here I found myself feeling less and less capable and more stiff and more in pain. And so also I have to say somatic movement, which goes hand in hand with yoga, but somatic movement to me was some of the best things that I was able to do for myself. And so that's a really deep listening and letting the body do what it naturally wants to do and explore. And again, with curiosity, with compassion, with a willingness to see what's there and not rile against it. I once had a teacher, actually one of my early yoga teachers, say something that stuck with me so much that I share this, which is that stress is resistance to what is. Stress is resistance to what is. So it's like if we drop the resistance to that, this is what is right now, what's possible now.
that's so great. I had the great fortune of meeting Byron Katie a few times in person, and one of my favorite quotes of her is, "I'm a lover of reality." You know, argue with what is, and you will lose every time, she says. So, and so that is a wonderful principle to live by. And then we wake up and we look in the mirror and, oh my gosh, my hair is turning gray, or I've got some pain, or I can't do what I used to be able to do. And so in your hardest days, in those like moments where it is a little bit more painful, or there's less energy, or you just went through this injury, what were some of the tools that kept you peaceful inside and able to heal?
Mm. Well, breath work is really key. Anybody could do it. You could be lying in bed and do breath work. And it brings in oxygen, first of all, oxygenating our cells, which is going to help naturally help with healing. But I also like literally kind of, calling in, hey, I need some help. Is it angels? Is it ancestors? Is it God? Whatever your name for it is. And feel myself being bathed in light. And then sometimes consciously sending that light or breath to an area that needs extra TLC. And I can feel it shift. Sometimes I'll feel it tingle or a little warmer. It doesn't necessarily take away the pain in the moment, but I feel like when we're doing that kind of internal work, recalibration for ourselves, that it can only help to send those cells some extra light, heat, oxygen in the healing process. And so sometimes, frankly, it was less doing and more resting, and giving myself some time and space to
There
do
we
that.
are again. But and light, working with the light, working with prayer, intention. So Gloria Owens is your website, is your name, but I must ask, how did you get the nickname that is now really what we all think of you as, Glow?
So, friends in college started calling me Glow way back when, but it never really stuck during that time. I wasn't ready for it, maybe. Here I am 30, 40 years later, and I've really finally embraced that more as the name that I go by. Gloria still, of course, still holds that energy. Of course, it means glory to God. But glow to me has that essence of the light, which I'm always trying to bring in, whether it's in my work or through my yoga teaching. And so what a perfect name, really. We just kind of want to shine ourselves from the inside out. and and then when I meet people, and they ask me what my name is, and I say Glow, they're always like, oh, that feels more real to me now than Gloria. Of course, my legal name is Gloria, but yeah, I've really embraced that more and more in the last few years.
Good for you for embracing it. And on your website, I really love that homepage section where you say what lights you up.
Yes.
Which is, and then there's a beautiful picture of you doing yoga with the light and the glow and the childlike glow in your eyes. It is so fitting for who you are. It's so
Well,
beautiful.
you know what? Can we talk about what lights you up for a moment? Because
Yeah.
I think that's something that has always intrigued me, even when I was more in the business world and I hadn't quite embraced my spiritual side the way I have now. There was always this sense of like, I want to know what makes people tick. You could say make people tick, but really it's what lights you up. Like, what makes your boat float? Like, whatever those things are. But for me, I always wanted to draw that out of people from a very early age. And so I think I've always been leaning into that question for a long time. I just didn't know how to articulate it that way. And go ahead.
Well, it's what we've been talking about. It really, I mean, the creative process, what lights you up, right? How to heal, what lights you up? How to stay useful, what lights you up? So,
And really, what brings you joy? And that's your name.
I know, here we are. It just keeps getting better. What else might you want to end with, Glow, just for, let's see, a tool, a encouraging word. Specifically, let's go with for people who are multi-passionate. So when they think about what lights me up, they've got a lot of answers. And so for anyone who's multi-passionate and can't do it all, what might you suggest?
Oh, this is this could be a whole other discussion for another day, but I will just leave you with that. Um, for me, all the different threads of all those different creative things and embodiment things that I wanted to explore. At times, other people looking from the outside might be thinking, gosh, she's all over the place. Like, she's doing this, she's doing that. But I can look back now with 2020 and see how those threads all weaved into what I'm doing now. Also want to share that you don't necessarily have to monetize it all. Like something could remain a hobby, something could remain a passion. Just because we can do it doesn't mean that we have to try to run multiple businesses. Been there, done that at the same time. And it was a lot of plates to keep spinning. And so to get to choose, and you've actually taught me a bit about the initiator, the doer, and the completer. I'm very much an initiator, someone with a lot of creative ideas. And so it's really easy to get overwhelmed really quickly. And so to check in with my doer, to check in with my completer and say, you know what, this is a really fun and juicy idea, but it might need to sit on my altar for a while, or it might need to stay in my journal for a while. Maybe I'll come back to it. Maybe I'll move back to it. So for me, the most difficult thing, but really the key thing is discernment. It's just discerning what do I need to prioritize right now that's going to move forward what I most want to focus on. And it can't all happen at once. We'll just spin out. There's too much energy. And we need the rest, and we need the attunement, and we need the focus, and we need the space to be able to actually do our most creative work.
Wow. Thank you. I'm so glad I asked. And Glow, thank you. Thank you for being a bright, shining light and sharing so much. This was a blast.
Oh, so much fun, Joy. Joyful.
Okay. All right. Shine on, everyone. Shine on. You got joy to glow.